Yeah, it's right here on page 58. They say another feature commonly seen after high doses of cannabis is postural hypotension. That is, people are less able to adjust their blood pressure adequately when rising from a seated or lying down position. This leads to a temporary drop in blood pressure, which in turn causes dizziness or even fainting. Yeah, I think this book also, there's also the palpitations issue, which is associated with this. So in other words, this inability to adjust your blood pressure and heart palpitations or arrhythmia-like symptoms typically, I think, go together with cannabis as a side effect. But this book correctly says it here. This happens at high doses of cannabis. It doesn't happen at medium or low doses. And that brings me to another issue, which I know I'm supposed to be reviewing this book, but let me just say something. I've kind of got a philosophy that I've been developing about how to use cannabis. You see, we live in a drunk culture. Okay, a culture full of drunks where people like alcohol. It's it's been made legal, and it's you have commercials for it during the Super Bowl and all that kind of stuff. And people know how to drink. They're used to it. They know what to do, and it has certain effects and so forth. But the point of drinking alcohol, usually the majority of instances, is people want to get drunk, get trashed. In other words, and so what people do is they really want to get bombed. Okay, so they want to drink out of their mind in certain ways, and but people then often will take that attitude or that idea and transfer it over to cannabis, which, well, it's simply not correct. Okay, you can't, if you want to get loaded and trashed and fall down the stairs and crap your pants and jump off buildings and stuff. Alcohol will make you, if you want to get totally loaded like that, to do cannabis that way simply doesn't make any sense. Okay, and only when you use too much do you have any of those two side effects. It's just simply an unknown or something. I mean, I talk to so many people. I say, yeah, I got paranoia, and I say to them, well, that's simply because you didn't do the right dosage. Cannabis is not meant to be used like alcohol, where you get totally bombed out of your mind. What cannabis is supposed to do is increase your mental abilities. Okay, so there's a philosopher named Terence McKenna who talks a lot about cannabis, and he seems to have the philosophy down correctly, where he used it as a way to aid with his work and writing books and doing, living his daily life. There's a Rastafarian I know here in town and that lives downtown in Ann Arbor, and he treats it the exact same way. He says, I don't really like my life. I don't like the job I have. Well, I won't tell you where it works because then people know exactly what I'm talking about. But he said, my job I don't like, and cannabis helps me adjust and live in those scenarios which I otherwise would hate. It just keeps me going. That's all. I don't use a huge dose. I just use a dose that allows me to feel spiritual and happy amid the horrors of civilization. So let me get more to the point. There's 3 ways you can smoke cannabis. One, or let's just talk about smoking rather than eating, because with eating you can't really control it. Let's just talk about smoking it right now. You can. There's the one way. You run out of the house quick. You just take 2-3 hits out of a joint, and then you go back inside. You're just barely feeling anything, but it's enough to take you out of your normal consciousness, what's called the ego consciousness, or what Eastern philosophers would call the fear and desire consciousness. That's one way, so let's call that a light dose. And then let's talk about a heavy dose. That's where you go in the garage and you sit there, you got a whole joint and you smoke and you're getting totally baked, and then you just keep smoking because you just want to get as loaded as you can. Okay, let's call that the strong dosage. And now let's talk about the one I'm a fan of, the middle dosage. It's right in between that. That's where you know how to use cannabis, you know how much exactly to smoke, more or less, to give you exactly a certain kind of mid-level high. So you'll probably stop smoking before you're completely destroyed. Maybe when you you take that initial hit, and as the sitcom Bored to Death says, you're instantly lobotomized. You go beyond that stage. You go into but when you're smoking, you don't wait until you're completely baked before you stop. You stop before that, realizing it'll set in another 5 minutes or so. And so you have a mid-level high. Now, the low and mid-level high never give rise to these two side effects. And they also allow you to be enormously productive in your work life. I mean, whether you hate whatever your work you're doing, say it's raking the lawn, or work, bagging groceries at the grocery store, or reading law reviews, whatever you do, whether you like what you do or don't like what you do, cannabis is simply meant. Its purpose on planet Earth is to help humans think and work at an optimal level. Okay, because our normal state of consciousness, which is called the ego, or as some Eastern philosophers might say, it's called the natural person. That's just a state based on, it's a shallow, superficial state of consciousness based on fear and desire. Okay, that's pretty much what everybody's existing in all moments. But if you get out of that state of consciousness and say a state of hypnagogia or cannabis consciousness, which those two are very similar, by the way, then all of a sudden you'll notice your mind works better. It's more productive. You can process thoughts better and so forth. So if you do the high dosage, that ability to productively work goes away. All you can really do is sit and watch the paint dry, which obviously is enjoyable, but it's not the same kind of. There's these three highs: light, middle, and heavy, are three different highs. The light high really is just kind of an easing of your egotistical fear and desire consciousness. The mid-level is a release from the fear and desire consciousness, but you're still a thinking, philosophical, working being. You can function in life very well. The high dosage, then you start to have a little bit of trouble talking, which I know is enjoyable. That can happen in the mid-level too. But you can't feel the passage of time anymore. You lose track of events, and really can do a little more than sit and stare at the wall and watch the paint dry, which is great. But it's really when you get done with the high in that heavy state, you don't remember as much. You don't take as much with you. In other words, you don't learn from it as much because there's a difference in the way your thoughts flow in the middle to the heavy. In the middle, your thoughts are enormously productive. You can analyze everything with incredible efficiency. It's just like you're a smarter being all of a sudden that has better mental powers. In the heavy states, that kind of goes away. You just sort of become oblivious to everything, and you don't notice, in many ways, life passing by, so to speak. Not fully, but much more so than the mid-level. So in my opinion, for reasons given, the two main reasons being, one, the mid-level high helps us as human beings work so productively and efficiently, whether that's function in our daily lives so productively and efficiently, whether that's socially dealing with a friend or doing your work or gathering food or whatever it is you happen to be doing, farming, going for a walk, whatever. You just do it right, okay? And then in the light and the heavy states, it's not. You're quite. Humans are made to work and to function in the world. So if we can have something that makes us do that perfectly, that's obviously. It seems to me that's what cannabis is for. It's just so well suited to our daily lives. And then at the higher doses, if we get side effects and so forth, it seems that we're not using it right in those cases. If you want to get if you want to forget who you are and forget what you did this evening or something, I recommend that you go and drink a case of beer instead of trying to do it with cannabis, because that's when you'll get the side effects, the two side effects anyways. So it's just surprising to me how so few people seem to know this, but this book, Science of Marijuana, seems to be loosely aware of that issue. Anyway, let's move to another issue. We're looking at page 55 here, the 55 and 56. Sorry, 56 and 57. The book talks about how this is a very deeply philosophical issue that comes out of the book. The book talks about how certain brain function is inhibited by cannabis. But all of you know that, especially in the mid-level cannabis smoking experiences I just described, your conscious experiences become much more productive. You're much smarter of a person. So I just find it very interesting that perhaps reduced brain function and can be associated with increased level of consciousness. I find that interesting because I've always thought that the consciousness and the mind is not a part of the brain, that they're separate, and the brain might not even be the only thing. There's consciousness is a big thing, and if you open up someone's head and brain surgery or something, you don't see consciousness there. You just see brain cells. It just seems to me the better argument. If you look inside of your own consciousness, it doesn't look like a material stuff. It just looks like immaterial stuff, different order of existence than the stuff you see outside of you, like rocks and trees and bricks and stuff. So I always thought that consciousness was not part of the brain. So would be kind of interesting. It just sort of goes along with that to think that brain inhibition might lead to increased intelligence. Interestingly, so it's just kind of a philosophical issue. Now the book talks. I'm just going to skim over some of the interesting, just to give you a taste of this book. I really kind of want to review this book rather than tell you everything that's in it. So I'll just give you some highlights. Talks a bit about addiction, and apparently cannabis is addicting to some animals, maybe dogs and cats, and but not addicting to humans. I guess there's 3 levels of habit formation that you can talk. You can talk about obsession, addiction, and I can't remember what the first one is, interest. So in order to go something like you have interest in a substance, you have obsession with a substance, and then you have addiction with a substance. I think marijuana in humans only can reach the level of obsession, where you have clear physiological effects when you have when you're taken away from the substance, if you have an obsessive attachment to it, but not in an addictive way. Where addiction is different, where the physiological effects of being withdrawn from the item you're addicted to will lead you to do certain behaviors to get the substance back. Such as stealing old ladies' purses to get money, or shooting people to get the drug, or whatever. An obsession, that those kinds of behaviors don't emerge. You just have a strong interest in physiological, and a weak physiological response to get the drug or the item back. And where it was the addiction, you have a much stronger effect in those ways. With interest, you don't have any physiological response, just interest in the item. I forgot what that first is called. It might be called habit formation or something. Can't remember. But obsession is what marijuana leads to, and it's different from addiction, which most people are oblivious to those 2 distinctions. And a lot of people say, oh, you can get addicted to marijuana, but really what they're talking about is obsession, which is a scientific term. Now, there's a little bit of talk in the book about the mental experience, what some philosophers might call the phenomenological experience of, what it really feels like to you. Here on page 86, they're quoting H.C. Wood. He says, when he talks about when he had cannabis extract, it was not a sensuous feeling in the ordinary meaning of the term. It did not come from without. It was not connected with any passion or sense. It was simply a feeling of inner joyousness. Okay, that is such a good quote. I've always considered that's what marijuana does. Everybody in the world has an inner hurt. They're humans, for some reason, I don't know exactly why. It's very mysterious. Humans are created to sort of feel inner pain. We're sort of always agitated. That's why so many of us seek popcorn munching movies and television and beer and so forth. We want to ease that pain.